first time I met her, she was standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun like two tiny mirrors of judgment. I'd just moved into the neighborhood, a quiet cul-de-sac tucked inside a nice suburban area run by the Riverwood Estates. HOA, my dream house, 2 stories, a porch swing, and a big oak tree out front that felt like something out of a movie. I'd worked for 10 years to afford that house. Every weekend shift, every late-night coding gig, every skipped vacation, all worth it. Until she showed up. "Excuse me," she called out, in that tone that's polite on the surface but dipped in poison. "You can't park there." I glanced around. My truck sat at the top of my own driveway, freshly paved, not blocking anything, not even close to the sidewalk. "Pretty sure I can," I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. "It's my driveway." Her lips pursed. "It's unsightly, and HOA rules state that driveways must maintain a uniform aesthetic. Yours doesn't match the neighborhood tone." I blinked. "You mean the concrete color?" She nodded like a queen passing judgment. "Exactly. You'll need to repave it. The HOA requires approval before any modifications." I laughed a little, thought she was joking. She wasn't. That was my first introduction to HOA Karen, the self-appointed ruler of Riverwood Estates. Technically, she was the HOA president, but in practice, she treated it like a kingdom and everyone else like her subjects. The next day, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my front door. "Driveway does not meet HOA standards. Fine, $250. I thought it was a mistake. I called the HOA office. Turns out she had personally filed the complaint. A week later, I repaved it, out of my own pocket, because fighting the HOA wasn't worth it. I figured that would be the end of it, but when you give someone like Karen an inch, they'll take the whole neighborhood. Soon it was my mailbox, then the color of my trash bins, then my lawn. Apparently my grass was a half-inch taller than regulation height. Very time I got a new notice, I saw her walking her little white poodle, clipboard in hand, watching, waiting, and every time I felt my blood pressure tick up just a little higher. A few months passed. I kept my head down, played by the rules, and tried to ignore her. But one evening something snapped. It was a Sunday. I was washing my truck, nothing fancy, just rinsing off the dirt from the week. The sun was going down. The air smelled like soap and grass. Peaceful. Then I heard the click of her sandals. "Do you have a permit for that?" It turned, hose still running. "A permit? For washing my car?" "Yes," she said flatly. "There are water restrictions this month. HOA policy prohibits exterior washing unless approved. You're wasting community resources." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Karen, you do realize this is my water, right? I pay the bill." She adjusted her sunglasses. Not the point. "The HOA government. External appearances and sustainability. Consider this a warning." I shut off the hose and stared at her. "Do you actually have a life, or do you just wander around looking for people to boss?" She gasped like I'd slapped her. "That's harassment. I'll be reporting this conversation." She stormed off, her dog trotting beside her like a furry little accomplice. The next morning, another notice. "Verbal harassment of HOA board member. Fine, $500. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was personal. She didn't like me. Maybe because I didn't bow down to her. Maybe because I was new. Maybe just because I was younger and didn't look like her golf club friends. Whatever it was, she'd decided I was her enemy. I tried to fight it, appealed to fines, showed photos, even talked to other neighbors. Most of them agreed she was a bit much, but nobody wanted to cross her. "She'll make your life hell," one guy whispered at the mailbox. "Trust me, man. Just keep your head down." But I couldn't anymore. Not after what she did next. One morning, I woke up to find fresh paint on my driveway. Not graffiti, but thick, uneven streaks of gray. The same dull color as the rest of the neighborhood driveways. Someone had poured it overnight. "Security camera footage?" Blurry, just a shadowy figure with a ponytail and a small dog. I called the police, filed a report. And of course, Karen showed up during the investigation, pretending to check in. "Oh, that's awful," she said, hand over her chest. "I told the HOA your driveway stood out too much. Maybe someone decided to fix it for you." She smiled. I swear she smiled. That was the moment I decided, and I was done playing defense. For the next few weeks, I stayed quiet, paid my fines, smiled when I saw her, let her think she'd won. But I started digging. I learned something interesting about our street, and something Karen clearly didn't know or had forgotten. See, when this subdivision was first built, the developer went bankrupt before finishing. Some of the smaller roads were technically private easements, not HOA owned. Meaning, the property rights under those roads were held separately, often by whoever owned the adjacent lots or bought them later through the county. Out of curiosity, I checked the public property records, and there it was. The small road that ran directly under. Karen's house driveway wasn't HOA property. It was still owned by the original developer's estate, and it was available for purchase through the county's tax lien auction. Price? Less than what she'd find me that year? My heart started pounding. If I bought that strip of land, technically, she'd be driving over my property every single day. Spent the next week making calls. County assessor, tax office, real estate lawyer. Every piece clicked into place like fate. Itself wanted revenge served fresh and legal. When the auction opened, there was only one bid, mine. A few weeks later, the deed arrived in the mail. I owned the 20-foot wide strip of asphalt that ran right past my house, directly under Karen's driveway. I didn't tell anyone at first. Just waited. Because revenge, real satisfying revenge, takes timing. And when the moment came, oh, it was perfect. I didn't want drama. I wanted peace. That's the lie you tell yourself when you're about to pull a move that will make your hair stand on end but feel like justice. The deed sat on my kitchen table like a little bomb in a manila folder. I'd put it there on purpose, where it would taunt me every time I passed. I didn't tell a soul. Not my sister, not my buddy Mark, who helped move boxes that first weekend. Not a single neighbor. I wanted the moment of revelation to be surgical. 2 days after the deed arrived, I printed a professional-looking letter on heavyweight paper and dropped it into the mailboxes of every house on the cul-de-sac. It was short and civil, no gloating, just facts. Dear Riverwood resident, it began, please be advised that I am the owner of the strip of land running from the north end of Maple Drive to the south, parcel ID DOLS. As owner, I grant a non-exclusive access easement for vehicular use to all residents. For maintenance and insurance reasons, the easement is subject to an annual access fee of $50 per household, payable to the owner. Failure to maintain the easement may result in revocation of access. Please contact me for details. I hesitated before adding, payable to the owner. Then I smiled and hit print. The reaction was immediate. First, a text from Mrs. Alvarez across the street. Is this real? Who does that? Then a knock at my door. My neighbor Tom, who'd installed a basketball hoop with perfect suburban pride, looking both amused and nervous. You buying the road was a flex I didn't know we were on, he said, eyes darting to the mail he clutched. Are you for real? Completely, I said. I own it. Tom whistled. You could charge a toll. My kids would riot. $50 a year keeps the streetlights on, I said, and covers liability insurance. It's not a money grab, it's paperwork. Tom laughed, then frowned. You're going to start charging the neighborhood. Karen's going to blow a gasket. That was an understatement. Within hours, Karen had assembled a small army, or at least her golf club coalition. She stomped up my walk like an avenging queen, holding a stack of HOA, documents, and a printed email chain as if they were evidence in a trial. How dare you, she said before she reached my porch. The vein in her temple throbbed theatrically. You cannot just buy the road and start extorting your neighbors. It's not extortion, I said. It's an access easement. I own the parcel. The county records are public. You recorded a deed? Where did you even get the money? Her eyes narrowed. You're trying to profit off this community. I paid for a tax lien at auction. It was legal, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I'd rather we all pay a little for maintenance. Then the HOA keep nickeling and fining people for leaving their trash bins out. Think of it as a maintenance cooperate. Karen scoffed. You're just trying to humiliate me. I want this reversed. I will call the attorney. I will call the board. I will have you removed. You could try, I said. But your name's on the HOA board minutes as president, not as owner of this strip. The law's pretty clear. She opened her mouth, closed it, like she was recalibrating. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled, not the pleasant parasol at the garden club smile. A small, tight smile with corners like knives. Fine, she said. You want to charge 50? Fine, we'll pay you. But we're also charging you for emotional distress. That was the old Karen talking, the one who weaponized paperwork and gossip and the social pressure of an entire cul-de-sac. She held a neighborhood meeting that Thursday in her living room. I did not go. I could have, and my lawyer said that would be cathartic. But I wanted her to rage on without me in the room to hand her new topics to fume at. Instead, I waited. The notices came next. The HOA mailed me a formal complaint, citing failure to notify the HOA before recording non-standard community land ownership documents. They threatened an injunction. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer, who sent back a curt email. You're clean on title. Respond politely. I responded politely. I also set up a separate escrow, account for the $50 fees and mailed invoices with itemized maintenance, plans, gravel top-ups, pothole sealing, liability insurance premiums. The invoices were gray and professional, not smug. If there was going to be humiliation, I wanted it to be disguised as bureaucracy. Word traveled like a rumor through the neighborhood grapevine. Some people called to tell me how genius it was. Some called to ask if they could pay monthly. A few were cold. You're making a circus, one neighbor muttered when he dropped a check in my mailbox. But the majority were silent. The kind who watch storms and only step outside when lightning is done. 2 nights before the showdown, my porch light flicked onto a scene straight out of an indie film. Karen standing across the street in her nightshirt, flashlight in hand, making notes in a small red notebook. Her poodle was on a leash, eyes gleaming like 2 beady moons. She watched my house as if she expected fireworks. I opened my door. You're trespassing, she hissed. Nope, I said. This is public sidewalk. You'll regret this, she said. Then she walked off, her flip-flops slapping the pavement. The next morning, my mailbox held a certified letter from the HOA attorney. The tone was clinical. Cease and desist, or we will commence legal remedies. I called my lawyer. He sounded amused. They can try. It'll cost the HOA more than your $50 a year will net you. They're posturing. Posturing, I thought as I drove to work, was Karen's favorite weapon. She'd stand on the line between law and bullying and thunder until people fled. She'd called in favors from a husband who was a judge's nephew and claimed to be well-connected. That had held weight in the neighborhood for years. People feared the repercussions of crossing her more than they feared bad governance. The real escalation came on Friday. I was in the garage when I heard the engine start down the street, then the rubber screech of a sedan attacking gravel. I looked up to see Karen barreling toward my driveway, face set, hands wide around the wheel. She pulled to a stop, stomped out, and marched up to my porch. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair in a tight knot. Her dog yapped in indignation. You will not charge my family! She spat. You cannot— Karen, I said, cutting her off. You have an access easement. You may use the road. I'm charging for maintenance. You may pay, or you may apply to the county for a different arrangement. That's your choice. She flinched like the word choice hurt. You're unreasonable. Maybe, I said. But I'm not wrong. She reached into her purse and pulled out a handful of HOA violation notices, waving them like a flag. You've already been fined for harassment. She read the notice aloud, like it was sacred text. You harassed me about water usage. I washed my truck, I said. I paid the fine twice. Her mouth worked. For a moment, I saw a different person, a tired woman who devoted her life to running a perfect little world that, underneath, was crumbling. I almost felt pity. Then she did the thing that made my stomach drop. She called the police and lied. I'm being threatened by my neighbor who purchased property in the subdivision and is now extorting the residents, she said into the receiver. Voice pitch perfect for drama. He's aggressive. 2 officers arrived. They were young, polite, and professional. They looked at my deed, at Karen, at the exchange of paperwork, and then at me. Sir, do you have any reason to threaten Ms. Wren? One asked. No, I said, the truth a dull thing. I haven't threatened her. I sent an invoice. They took statements, shuffled paper, and left with a promise to follow up. Karen watched them go, chest heaving like she'd won. After they left, I realized something else had shifted. The neighborhood had a new salacious topic. People talked in whispers at the mailbox. Kids on bikes slowed by my house. Mrs. Alvarez's cat sat on my stoop, like a tiny spy. The petitioning that Karen had subtly encouraged for years had found new life. Some wanted to side with her out of fear, others with me out of quiet amusement. I lay awake that night thinking about what I'd done. I'd wanted a clean legal solution, not to become the neighborhood provocateur. I'd wanted to stand up for myself. But as the street hummed with the nocturnal drone of sprinklers and distant TV laughter, I understood the cost. I'd started a chain reaction. A small purchase had turned the cul-de-sac into a pressure cooker. I had won a legal card, but had also poked at a wound that ran deeper than paint and concrete. It was about control, belonging, and the fear people have of losing the tiny empires they build. The next morning, there was a crowd at Karen's house. She'd called an emergency HOA meeting and invited half the block. Through my window, I watched her rehearse lines and point fingers. I watched neighbors divide like iron filings around an invisible magnet. I had a choice then: step in and be the victor, or step back and let the story breathe. I chose to step in, but not in the way Karen expected. I grabbed my manila folder, my lawyer's number in my phone, and walked to the meeting. The door opened before I could knock. Karen's smile at my arrival was a weapon she'd sharpened for years. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you have been painting my driveway," I replied. She blinked. The room hushed. Everyone turned. The air tasted like that moment when a crowd realizes their amusement has been turned into something real and possibly dangerous. "You have 45 minutes, she said coldly. "Make them count. 45 minutes is a long time when you're about to change the dynamic of an entire street." I spoke plainly, legally, and with a soft edge. I showed the deed, explained the escrow account, and laid out the maintenance plan. I described what the $50 covered: pothole repair, insurance, a reserve for resurfacing in 10 years. I avoided gloating. I avoided threats. When I finished, a man in the back, Mr. Conrad, who loved his roses more than anything, stood and clapped, slow and deliberate. A ripple of polite applause followed. Karen's face tightened until it hurt. "You can't just buy our road and make us pay," she hissed. "You can challenge the title in court," I said. "But if you do, you'll have to sign a retainer. And if you lose, you'll be on the hook for my legal fees. Are you prepared to put the HOA's resources to that?" Silence. Karen understood legal math better than most. She saw the horizon of expense and the possibility of losing face in public and paled. She pivoted, as she always did, to a tactic she'd used before: personal. "You're a bully," she whispered. "You're not a neighbor." "Maybe not," I said. "But I'm honest. And that has value too." The meeting dissolved into petty accusations and threatened lawsuits. That would cost a fortune and accomplish nothing. But beneath the legal battle, something else had happened. The neighborhood had split open. People were forced to pick a side. As I walked home, the cul-de-sac felt different. Like a pond where someone had thrown a stone and left concentric ripples moving outward. Where those ripples would land, I didn't know. I only knew that the moment had arrived when you either live with the consequences of your decisions or you run from them. I was tired but not sorry. Because in the quiet after the meeting, standing on my porch, with the manila folder in my hands, I realized one more thing. Karen wasn't going to stop. And I had to decide how far I was willing to go. I went inside and, for the first time since I bought the deed, called my sister. "Whatever you do," she said after I explained everything, "don't let this make you lose yourself. There's a line between standing up and becoming what you hate." Her voice landed like a soft hand on the small, raging heart in my chest. I slept poorly that night. When dawn cracked open the cul-de-sac, it brought a new sound, not the floaty gossip of neighbors, but the metallic clink of a briefcase. Karen had hired an attorney. The HOA had filed for an emergency injunction, and someone had left a wilted white lily on my doorstep with a note. "This isn't over." I picked up the lily, read the note, and understood. She wasn't bluffing. I put the lily in a vase, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my manila folder. The deed was inside, and under it, a small, typed clause I had my lawyer draw up that morning. It was simple, legal, and unromantic. It read, access easement. Remains granted contingent upon adherence to community standards and a mutual maintenance agreement. Revocation will be considered only in cases of willful refusal to negotiate. Negotiation. The word hummed in my head like a tuning fork. I didn't want a war. I wanted a boundary. But Karen had made it personal. And some battles, once engaged, blur the line between right and revenge. As I sat there, the cul-de-sac alive with the low murmur of a neighborhood waking to a conflict that had been simmering for years, I understood something the neighbors would soon have to learn. Property law could be cold, but it has an emotional weather system all its own, and Karen had just called for a storm. There's a kind of silence that comes right before everything breaks. That's what the neighborhood felt like in the weeks after the HOA filed its injunction against me. No one waved anymore. Lawns went untrimmed. Even the kids stopped playing basketball in the street. Riverwood Estates, once a suburban picture of order, had become a chessboard. Everyone was waiting to see which king would fall first, me or Karen. I spent more time talking to lawyers than to actual people. They said I was solid. My ownership was legal. The HOA had no standing. Still, I knew that wasn't the same as peace. Karen didn't care about winning legally. She cared about winning socially. And that battlefield had always been hers. Then came the storm. Literally. A week after the court papers were filed, the skies opened up. Sheets of rain hammered the cul-de-sac for 2 straight days. The drains clogged, the street flooded halfway to the mailboxes, and by the 3rd morning, it was clear the water was pooling right at the base of Karen's driveway. Her poodle barked helplessly from behind the window as I stood at the edge of my porch, coffee in hand, watching the water creep up her pristine flower beds. Her car, a silver Lexus she polished like an heirloom, was halfway up the drive, wheels already sinking into the mud. For once, I didn't feel satisfaction, just inevitability. The road under her house, the one she used every single day, was mine. And now it was washing away. Around noon, she came knocking. Soaked, furious, mascara running like a watercolor painting in the rain. "Are you happy now?" she snapped. "This is your road, isn't it? You own it? Well, it's collapsing. Fix it!" "I will," I said calmly. "Once the access fees are paid." The HOA's injunction froze the maintenance account. I can't legally touch it until the court clears it. Her mouth opened, closed. She realized what that meant. She'd sued me into a corner, and now she couldn't drive out of her own house. "I have to get to work," she shouted. "There's water in my garage." I shrugged slightly. Guess we'll both have to wait for the county hearing. For the first time since I'd moved in, Karen looked small. Not furious. Not powerful, just human, frustrated, beaten. But she couldn't admit it. "Not yet." "You think this makes you the good guy?" she said bitterly. "You're destroying the whole community over your pride." "My pride?" I said, my voice low. "You fined me for washing my truck. You painted my driveway while I slept. You made my life hell over concrete color. This isn't pride, Karen. This is boundaries." She stared at me, eyes wet. Not from rain now, but something else. Then she turned and walked away through the puddles, her perfect suburban world collapsing under every step. By the time the county hearing came 2 weeks later, the damage was visible, literally. The asphalt had cracked from the flooding, and the HOA's neglect made it worse. Half the neighbors were furious at Karen for dragging them into a legal mess. The other half blamed me for making things harder. The hearing was held at the county office downtown. Karen came in a crisp navy suit, papers neatly stacked. I came with my lawyer and a single folder. The same manila one that had started all this. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just told the story. I told them about the driveway, the fines, the paint, the harassment. I showed the photos, the notices, the police report she'd filed with lies scribbled into official boxes. Then I placed the deed on the table. "I didn't buy this road to hurt anyone," I said quietly. "I bought it because I was tired of being controlled. Tired of people like her deciding what my home should look like, how I should live, what I could do on my own property. I played by the rules. She changed them. So I found one she didn't know about, and I used it, legally." The room was silent. Even the county clerk looked uncomfortable. Then Karen spoke, her voice smooth again. like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Your Honor, this man is using property law to harass the entire neighborhood. He's manipulating the system for revenge. Revenge? I asked softly. Or justice? Her eyes snapped to mine. I didn't look away. After 20 minutes of deliberation, the judge ruled in my favor. Ownership confirmed. HOA injunction dismissed. I was free to maintain the road and to charge reasonable access fees if I wished. Karen's jaw tightened as the gavel hit the block. Outside the courthouse, the sky was bright and clear again. The storm had passed, literally and figuratively. Karen stood on the steps, clutching her folders like they were the last shield she had. So that's it? She said. You win, I lose. I paused. No, we both lose if we keep living like this. She blinked. Excuse me? You wanted control. I wanted peace. Neither of us got what we wanted. You turned a neighborhood into a battlefield. I turned your rules against you. We're both standing in the wreckage. She stared at me, rainwater still clinging to her hairline. So what now? Now, I said, you decide if you want to be right or if you want to be happy. I walked away. She didn't follow. That night I sat on my porch as the streetlights flickered on one by one. For the first time in months, the cul-de-sac was quiet again. A few neighbors waved tentatively as they drove by. Even Tom stopped to chat. Heard you won, he said, grinning. You're a legend. Not trying to be, I said. Just want a normal driveway. He laughed. Good luck with that. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A white envelope appeared on my porch. No name, just a return address. Riverwood HOA. Inside was a single check, $50 and a short note. For road maintenance. K. Wren. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. Over the next few weeks, things started to shift. Slowly, awkwardly, but they shifted. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in months started waving again. Kids started riding bikes down the street. People began talking about replacing the streetlights together, maybe even doing a barbecue in spring. And Karen? She still walked her poodle every morning. But she didn't stop to inspect driveways anymore. She nodded politely when she saw me. Sometimes she even smiled. The feud had burned the old order to ash, and from that, something new was growing. Then came the last twist. 2 months later, I got a call from my lawyer. He sounded amused. You sitting down? He asked. Should I be? You remember the rest of that parcel? The one that runs past her property and wraps around the cul-de-sac? Yeah, I said. It's up for tax auction next month. Same situation as before. Technically, you could buy the rest of the road, own the whole block if you wanted. I laughed. You're joking. Nope, entire thing. Cheap, too. I sat in silence for a long moment, thinking about what that would mean. Power, control, the very thing I'd fought against. I could own the whole street, every inch she walked on, every turn her car made. I could become what she once was, the ruler of Riverwood Estates. But I didn't want that. Not anymore. I shook my head. Let it go, I said. Let the county keep it. My lawyer chuckled. You sure? That's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of irony. I'm sure, I said. Sometimes the win is knowing when to stop fighting. A month later, the neighborhood held a small block party, the first one in years. Kids chased balloons, someone grilled burgers, and for a few hours, Riverwood actually felt like a community again. Karen came too. She brought a potato salad and stood awkwardly by the lemonade table, like a guest at her own event. Eventually, she walked over. Your road looks good, she said, sipping from a paper cup. Smooth repaving job. Thanks, I said. You could say it finally found its foundation. She smiled faintly at the pun. You didn't have to fix it, you know. Not after all that. I didn't fix it for you, I said. I fixed it for everyone. She nodded slowly, looking out over the street she'd once ruled like a fiefdom. You know, she said after a moment, I thought power meant control. Turns out it's just fear dressed nice. That's a hard lesson, I said. Yeah, she whispered. But you made sure I learned it. For the first time, her smile seemed real. When the sun dipped low and the string lights glowed soft across the cul-de-sac, I looked down the street that had caused so much chaos, the asphalt gleaming faintly under the golden light. smooth and quiet. Kids raced their bikes over it. Neighbors laughed by the grills. Even the poodle trotted happily past. And for the first time since moving there, I felt like I was actually home. Maybe that's what this was all about. Not winning or losing. Not revenge or pride, but finally claiming my own space in the world. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like fixing what was broken, even if you didn't break it. As I packed up chairs that night, Karen came by one last time. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Buying the road, all of this?" I thought about it. About the sleepless nights, the legal bills, the tension, the isolation, and then about the peace that followed. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But not because I did it. Because it had to be done in the first place." She nodded. "Fair enough." She started to walk away, then paused. "For what it's worth, I repainted my driveway last week. Didn't even ask the HOA. I smiled. "Guess you're learning." She grinned. "Guess we both are." A few weeks later, the county sent me a letter confirming the case closure. The road, my road, was officially cleared, recorded, and recognized under my name. I could have framed the paper, bragged about it, turned it into a monument of revenge. Instead, I folded it, tucked it away in a drawer, and forgot about it. Because by then, the title didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I'd taken back control of my life without becoming the thing I despised. And Karen? She'd learned that no one, no matter how powerful, owns the ground beneath everyone else's feet. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone, it's making them understand. Moral of the story: never let someone's need for control steal your peace. Stand your ground, but don't lose your soul doing it. Power without compassion destroys. Boundaries built on respect create peace. So if someone tries to pave over your life, don't fight fire with fire. Buy the road, fix the cracks, and walk it your way. If you've ever stood up to a Karen in your life, someone who tried to control your happiness, share this story. Because sometimes the best way to build peace is to own the road that tried to break you.